And I forgot you mentioned that this whole place was your grandparents, and then if we could just take it back to that then. So growing up, you said near St. Louis, and then you'd come out here to where we're at currently?
Yeah, on the weekends.
Mm-hmm. And then whenever that was going on, could you see yourself, because you mentioned whenever we were kind of driving around that, you know, you always wanted to be a farmer. When, do you remember the first time that thought ever came to you?
Yeah. I was 3, and I was out here in the front field, and my grandpa gave me, you know, I guess it was around my 3rd birthday, and my grandpa took me out here, and he said, you know, for your birthday, I'm gonna give you a calf. And so we got to pick it, and I picked a little brown heifer calf, and I named it M&M Gummy Bear. So that's that's like my first true like cow memory, like that I can remember, because without seeing like photos, right? Because you have cow memories where it's pictures with you or video of you with cows, right? So I have some of those.
Yeah.
But that's like my first memory of like that I can actually remember without pictures.
And then I'm assuming, were you the only one of the 6 and your siblings that wanted to be a farmer?
Yeah, so like at that time, you know, my grandpa did that. I have a couple older cousins, he did that with them. And then some of my younger brothers, he did that with them. I think one of my oldest cousin picked a steer, right? Well, that didn't work out, right? Because it's not like you can breed a steer. And my brother right underneath me, he picked out a cow too on his birthday. And towards the end of all my brothers, you know, they didn't get anything, which is funny. But yeah, so back to your question on did my brothers, are they interested in, I mean, my brother right underneath me, he's like an accountant CPA, and he helps me on the number side, but doesn't do like the labor side of stuff. And then my brother under him is in the military, then the next one's an aerospace engineer, and then the next one is a cowboy in Wyoming, and then the other one is in high school still.
Because I'm always curious, just leading up to where you're at today, when did you start, I guess, what was the impetus of finally, you know, starting Hortsmann Cattle Co? And I guess just what did that journey up to that point really look like for you?
So I knew I wanted to be a farmer for, you know, all of my life, right? And when we were going through, you know, like career stuff in high school, you know, you would take kind of like these tests that tell you what you were going to be.
Yeah.
And mine kept coming up as logger for some reason.
You're the only one in the whole school that had that.
Yeah, and I don't know why, but I knew I wanted to be a farmer, but I could never get it to say farmer. I could always get it to say logger. So I did, in high school, I worked for a couple ranches. We actually moved west to Wyoming, so I went to high school in Wyoming. And, you know, kind of, you know, that was more of my scene than, you know, school in St. Louis. And so out there, you know, you get around a lot bigger places, and it's like it starts making like, okay, well, ranching is, you know, you can do it, but it's going to take, you know, more cows and things like that. And so I actually started Hortsmann Cattle Company out there. It was like January 31st, 2012 is when I established Hortsmann Cattle Company. So that was my halfway through my freshman year of college, actually. And I drew the brand in high school. So came up with the name and drew the brand in high school. And then it wasn't until freshman year where like it started. And then that's where I came back here, went to Mizzou, and then I was coming down here every weekend to the farm At the time, it was still, just my grandpa's cow herd, and of about 20 cows. And then I bought a set of cows and kind of took off from there.
Whenever you're first initially starting out too with 20 cows and just kind of the size of the property, yeah, I'm curious now, leading up to regenerative agriculture, was that always in the back of your mind? Or, because I know with agriculture, it can go any which way for how you manage whatever you're doing, essentially.
Yeah, so regenerative agriculture was not even a word that I knew. So I was gonna do like the seed stock commercial, everything that the universities preach. Right?
Can you explain exactly what all that is?
Yeah, basically it's air quotes, strategically providing inputs to produce enough saleable pounds, right? And there really wasn't much emphasis on cost, right? But it was like the more pounds you can produce, the more you will sell. Or the more you will sell, the more you will gross or make, right? They never talked about what it would actually cost to produce those pounds, right? Or the impacts of grazing or anything like that. It was more if what you could feed, how cheap you could feed it, you could just play with all these numbers that never really ended up adding up to anything. But it was all about how do you produce the most pounds on per unit. So that's what we started doing here with my own cows. So 2012, my dad added 200 acres next door as a neighboring farm came up for sale. So then that's where my cows went that I took the money out for. And then my grandpa still had his cows here, his beefalo herd, super low inputs, not regeneratively grazing, but definitely, he had different paddocks and we would put cows here and then we would move them and do that kind of thing. No real grain or anything, no shots, things like that. Well, so then I get the farm next to it, get my own cows, and I just start throwing the university at them, right? And feeding and buying feed, and we had it split up a little bit just from my grandpa's grazing or paddocks. Like I knew enough that we needed to take the 200 acres and have, a few paddocks for it.
At that time, why did you think it was good to do that rather than just having one open paddock?
It made like checking on them easier, right? Or handling them easier. You could keep them kind of in a group because when they were running on 200 acres and calving, you would see one there and one there. And it was just kind of hard because I was basically farming on the weekends, right? I would go to Mizzou, which is about 100 miles away, and I would drive back every weekend and try to farm. And then I would go back to school on Sunday nights or Monday mornings and then come back on Fridays. So we needed some sort of paddock to kind of contain them.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, through the university stuff at them, started feeding and, baling hay and, doing all that. Fancy minerals and, whatever. Quickly found out that didn't really work. But it took me going all the way through college, right, doing it there, the way that we were learning.
Whenever you say it doesn't work, in what way?
It just, the money side of it wasn't there. We were spending more on inputs than what we were selling. And, when you're trying to have the farm or the cattle enterprise stand on its own and pay every bill directly correlated to the farm, plus for the cattle and land and things like that. It just wasn't working because, you know, you're also wanting to draw a paycheck out of it too. And it wasn't working. I didn't have like a off, and I was very strict with myself from the very beginning of not putting any off-farm income into it, right? I wanted the cows and the farm needed to pay for itself. Mm-hmm. So after I got out of school, I was able to go a few months, and then I had to get a part-time job at the feed store. And from there, I needed more hours, so then I took a job with Rosebud Tractor. So I sold tractor parts for about a year and a half. And then from there, I was working 5.5 days a week there, and then trying to run a couple hundred cows. And then from there, I went to Soil and Water, which is a government job. And that was where I started learning about regenerative agriculture. I think that was around 2016, 2017. And that's when we made that change to regenerative.
So the whole time from 2012, you've been working full-time other jobs while also trying to manage these on the weekends? I guess after you graduated too, it sounds like. So whenever you're in Missouri, you were still... You had school during the week, you came here the weekends, and then after you graduated, you just mentioned a couple employers that you had, so you'd work that during the week and then come back on the weekends?
Well, I worked, after I graduated, I moved back to the farm, and then I just had jobs around here, yeah. So like I would, flashlight cowboy, morning, you would do everything in the dark, and then you'd go to work, then you'd come home and do everything in the dark. Wintertime sucked because it's dark. It would be dark before you even got out of work. Yep. If you worked at 5, got off at 5. So, so then after that, like tractor parts and stuff, I was like, well, I'm not really using my degree. I want to, I want to do something more with agriculture and I liked infrastructure and like the grazing side of it, so like while I'm doing all this, I'm kind of learning a little bit here and there. And we had in 2015 we needed water on that farm, the 200 acres I was running on really bad. And so like I used the government program with Soil and Water, so our state cost share, and they helped us develop like water points, but to do water you had to add more fencing. So then we added, we took what was 200 acres and I split it into like 4 paddocks. We took that and split it into 10. And then so now now I'm starting to like, oh, I like cattle movements and like I like anything to do with cows. So like when they're grazing, and I like planting fences and watching how cows move and rotate to so designing all that. So there was a job with Soil and Water that came up. I was like, oh, after we put our grazing system in, I was like, I kind of like that. Maybe I'll apply to that. And, everything you hear is like you need jobs for benefits and insurance and stuff, like a government job. And I was so busy, right? Like I didn't necessarily read the fine print of the job. And so, but I applied and I got it. And I knew I was going to be, government holidays, federal holidays I'll have off and all this stuff. And the main thing was I was going to be off on Saturdays too. And, working 5 days a week versus 5.5. And so I got into the government job, and there was a guy, a lifetimer, government employee behind me. He goes, well, if you're going to take this job, or now that you're here, you really need to look up 3 people and it was Greg Judy, Ray Archuleta, and I think it was Gabe Brown. And so basically I just...
And this was 2016?
Yeah, 2016, 2017, right in there. I think it was, we've been, we're on our 8th year of regenerative grazing. So I guess that would have been like 26. Yeah, took the job 2016, 2017. I switched our practices. So yeah, so like I just started deep diving, right? Government job, you have tons of time, tons of downtime. So I just, immersed myself in YouTube, watched anything I could. And that's when I found like Alan Williams and Justin Rhodes and Joel Salatin and John Soskovich on chickens, and all these different people. I just started binge watching YouTube, and I was like, okay, well, we need to group cattle up and do this and do that. So I just started implementing all this, right? And was there for about a year, and then kind of like I was coming up on my year mark with the government, and I got a raise, but it was just a planned raise, right? And so I was like, oh, this is cool, got a raise, never had a raise before. And it was planned, and started like, well, if I'm gonna get this much of a raise this time, well, anyway, I realized it capped out at 5 years, right? So after 5 years, I was like, well, this is dumb, right? So basically then I kicked my YouTube and learning into high gear. I was like, I got to figure something out between now and my 5-year cap. So I learned as much as I could, went to grazing things, but like the whole time that was making me a better technician for designing grazing systems for people and being able to explain how and why water should be here and why, your grazing system, everybody had their own opinion on how their grazing system needed to be set up, because I was the technician that was going to design them, right? And so like I could go there and just say, well, if you think about it, if you would put your water here because of relocation of your shade, your cattle will graze more evenly throughout your fields because of this. Or, well, I wouldn't really put your fence here because of how your cows are going to flow through here. They're going to break a corner, and then you're going to have calves on one side. So like I was, like I actually really cared and had this basic grazing mindset about able to help it. Because like most of the people that take the soil and water jobs, they don't necessarily have the passion of grazing. So anyway, once I figured out I was going to cap, I'm like, well, I need to figure out how to do more grazing. So I found a job on Indeed, and I started running I was a small ranch for a guy, but it decreased my hours by 10 hours. So I went down to 30 hours. And then I was able to, death by diversity. Well, I didn't know that at the time, but I was able to diversify, add pigs, chickens, layers, sheep. I was able to add all that stuff in because I was used to working 7 days a week, but now I'm decreasing hours off farm and I'm increasing hours on the farm so I can add more things. Then after I did that for a year, the guy that I was working for, it was kind of false promises. So I took a different ranch job which bumped my hours back up, but I got to see, a lot more cows. So it was like, probably when I took the job, it was about 450 pairs and a couple thousand acres. And so I was doing that while doing this. So like at one time I was like the solo guy on 700 cows.
Holy smokes.
And driving a bunch. And then I started a meat business. So we're up towards like 2019. So 2019 is when that all started. So then I'm doing a meat business, running all those cows and then I hit big time burnout.
I was gonna say, because this is why I'm glad that you're sharing all this. I think it's around 84 to 86% in agriculture have an off-the-farm job, and that's what most people don't understand at all. Farming in itself is very intensive from a time, but physical labor, all of that standpoint. But then also to adding in the mix of having to have a second job. I mean, just like where you described, even whenever you're in school. And how long can you, like, people will think, oh, you can do that in a year, but you've got to do that year after year after year. And like you said, you're going to eventually reach massive burnout from that. So I guess going back to 2019 then, how did you continue on with all of that?
Yeah, so basically I just kind of went through, because I was getting each time I was making a job change, I was getting closer and closer to this goal of full-time farming, right? I would either decrease in hours, which is also like a decrease in pay essentially, but that means like the farm is starting to work. But like this goal of farming full-time for myself was always right there. And so like that kept me going. And I liked the guy I worked for at my last job. I enjoyed working for him. I mean, I saw a lot of cattle and had a lot, I was able to do grazing stuff there and just the experience from being the only person and having to figure out how to manage, multiple herds of cattle. I mean, it was really good.
How did you even manage to do that by yourself?
It was a chore. I mean, he had a little part-time help. He had I think he was at the time, he was like 75-year-old neighbor that would help. So he would do like the mechanicking and stuff. So like I'm pretty good at breaking stuff. So like I could break it and then I would just call him. And so like I just wouldn't, stop.
Yeah.
Like if something would happen, like tractor's got a flat tire, I would just tell him and I could go on to the next farm, and then we would rake and bale. Like I used to rake and bale and it would just be him and I, so like I would rake a little bit, then I'd jump into a bale tractor and bale, and then he might rake a little bit, but yeah.
I can see why you enjoy a nice glass of beer.
Yeah, we we went for whatever. It was good. I mean, I'd do it all again.
Well, that's another thing too with agriculture is a lot of farmers, they just love it.
Yeah, you gotta love it. You gotta love it.
Did you have any free time at all that time then?
A little bit. I mean, it was more like if I had free time, I was going to like a soil health academy. I was going to something to keep learning.
Yeah, so you were just all in.
Yeah, because like I could see, I could see how this is starting to work, right? And and I could see like the meat business is starting to take off a little bit, and each year. So from 2019, we started out where we were grazing cattle for, we would buy stockers, and we would graze them, and then we would sell them to meat businesses all over. And so like that part I liked like that, so I just kept expanding that.
Wait, can you explain that to the consumer that might not understand that? So you would raise them and then you would sell them to the meat business before they're processed?
Yeah, so I would go around and buy like weanling steers from people's farms, off people's farms. And we basically did like South pulls at the time. And so like I would put together, 75 or so steers that I'd buy off people's farms, and we'd put them in our grazing system with our cows, and we'd start grazing them, and we'd get them up to a certain weight, and then we would sell them. And then anything that was wild or, kind of something no one really wanted, we ended up where we would sell bits and pieces out of each group, and then we'd start over, but all the wilds and stuff no one wanted ended up like growing. And then it was like, well, what are we going to do with all these? So then that's actually how we started the Hortsmann Cattle Company. We got basically a bunch of stuff no one wanted. And so it was like the only way we're going to actually make it work money wise is like if we have a meat business that could potentially buy these.
And then at that time too, when you're saying meat business, what do you mean by that?
So it started out as a direct-to-consumer business in St. Louis. We started going to farmers markets. And we did beef, chicken, eggs, and pork. And the beef was, it was all super small scale, right? It'd be like 12 pigs a year, a couple hundred broilers that in houses that I designed. And then we had a chicken tractor that had about 200 layers in it.
And then, because you mentioned previously the death by diversity.
Yeah, we're getting there.
So at that time, those were your own pigs and chickens, or were you utilizing someone else's farm to sell at farmer's market?
No, we would raise it all.
And then
we had a small flock of sheep.
Okay, because I would love to just hear what your thoughts are when you're mentioning just the death by diversity, because with regenerative agriculture, a lot of people talk on multi-species.
Yeah.
And that's really harped on a lot. So I'd just love to hear, your experience and why you say death by diversity.
Yeah, so you talk about stacking enterprises, right? So when you say pigs, chicken, let's name it all. Pigs, chickens, beef, layers. You can put honeybees, sheep, goats. You can have 7, I'm sure I'm missing something, right? Alpacas, peacocks, guineas, whatever, rabbits. You can have them all on the same acre, right? Because they all don't necessarily require the same thing, right? So that's kind of the idea behind it, right? So if you have 10 acres, you could potentially have 10 different species on that acre. And each thing produces income. But, each thing requires its own unique, some of the overheads are the same, but a lot of them are different. So basically you get, and a lot of the tasks aren't overlapping. Like a pig and a egg layer and bees and a cow, all 4 of those don't exactly have the same thing that they need every day. It's not like you can just do one thing and take care of 4.
Right.
So, so then you get to running around and only doing chores, right? Then your farm, idea planning, big picture stuff, all that gets put on the back burner because you're just trying to get to your job, and then you come home and do chores. So that's kind of where you get burnout, right? Is when you're always doing chores and you're not moving the needle forward on the whole farm.
And then when did you notice that for you all with just the different species you're running?
It just came to a breaking point because also with cattle, right? It's not just like you have cows, right? We were spring calving, we were fall calving, we were developing heifers, we were putting together grazing steers, we were finishing cattle. So we had 5 different enterprises going with just a cow herd alone, and we were running all those in one herd, right? And because to manage your grass, it's better to have one herd than it is multiple herds. And so, just that alone was a chore and a half. And I don't know what necessarily the tipping point was, but I think some of it had to do, the guy I was working for kept buying more farms, and so we were expanding over there. And I just physically couldn't, like our cow herd here, which is my main passion, was starting to fall, the management of it. So, and kind of doing some rough numbers on chickens and egg layers and pork. If you're not doing it at a scale where you can buy enough in bulk, that really wasn't penciling. You know, it was like, oh, well, we made $5 on a bird, like on a broiler, right? By the time we went to the processor and everything. So that's where it's like, okay, we can probably start cutting that. At some point I heard about ranching for profit too, which was owned by Dave Pratt at the time, and listening to podcasts. And I started putting all this stuff together. So that's kind of where it's like, okay, well, this isn't working. So in 2022, June of 2022, I actually quit my full-time job and became full-time for myself. And
At that time, was it because you finally, from the financial standpoint, made sense, or you're just
it was like
needing to go
on
all
the
in?
line. Yeah, I was on the line. Like I didn't know my numbers good enough to make that, but it was like, I have got to figure, it's either now or it's never.
Yep.
So I just jumped and hoped it would work, basically.
And then you mentioned running 5 different beef operations within the same herd. Can you actually explain the differences in those two? Because to the average person, they might just drive around, they see a bunch of cows, and that's
Yeah.
it. So it might, but they see if they were to see your herd, they're like, that's just a bunch of cows. But you're just saying that there's actually multiple different operations. So if you could explain those differences, and then also how you were able to manage all that together.
It was really hard. So we had, the spring calving cows, right? Those would be cows calving in March, April. We've pushed our calving back to April, May now.
Why is that?
So we're calving more with, our forage and better weather. We could still get a snowstorm in March. We calved earlier because everybody said you couldn't, because your bulls wouldn't want to work when it's hot. So anyway, so we would calve in March, April back then. And, so about that time we would have fall cows with weanling calves. And I mean, it's just really difficult to manage. I don't know, because it's in one herd. So the, heifers development, right, and steers and finishers, like they all require different things, and no one's going to out-eat a mature cow. So like your heifers and your steers and your finishers, they really need the best, but a mature cow she's just so efficient at eating and just so good at it that she's going to beat anything. So I don't know. It's just a lot to manage. I mean, you have calves being born year round, so if you wean heifers and then you put them back in with your herd, if you don't wait long enough, their moms won't be in milk, but your fall herd or your spring, vice versa, your spring herd will be in milk, so you get heifers that want to bum off of your cows. And then when you're buying steers in, if you buy them right off the cow from somebody and you bring them in, somebody's in milk then, so then your steers want to bum.
Did that happen to your herd?
Oh yeah,
all the time?
yeah. That's kind of one of the big issues with I see with letting the cow wean its calf. Is like if you're going to calve year round or calve in some sort of scenario like that, the calf may not actually wean itself. The cow may kick it off, but the calf might go to somebody else. So.
And then mentioning in 2022, that's when you changed how you operate your business? Yeah,
so it kind of been gradually changing different things. So yeah, somewhere in there there was a lot that was going on. So like when we cut things out was, kind of happened over time. Last to go was kind of our fall calving herd, just because, as we got further and further down the regenerative journey, it kind of occurred to me like a fall calving animal is not necessarily regenerative or running with nature animal, right? It may fit your forage or like fescue and stuff like that, but it's truly not an adaptive animal. A fall calving cow is not an adaptive animal.
And then, because whenever we were driving out there, you were also just really explaining the cycles of the grasses and the weather and whatnot. And I would just love to hear you kind of repeat that in some ways, because, again, a lot of consumers, me included, for most of my life, I would just look outside and you just see grass and it just looks like nature. But to you, it's obviously way different. And then paired with actual weather and the seasonality of things, that's also how you operate with moving your cattle and just the whole process of regenerative agriculture.
Yeah, so, I mean, each year we learn more, right? I'm a big advocate for like observation and absorption. So you basically look and take time to look, and then you absorb what you're seeing, right? Good or bad, right? Why are things happening? Why is stuff playing out certain ways? And then, because you have to start figuring, because being 8 years in to this regenerative movement, there's not too many people, or there's not enough not enough people before us that have actually that are like sharing ideas. There might be regenerative grazers or people doing it for 10, 20 years, but not actively sharing about it. Mm-hmm. Where they're not necessarily practicing every day to like keep changing some of those thoughts. Because as we learn more and technology evolves with seasonality of grasses. So you have your spring flush, and that's how we're altering our grazing patterns. So everybody wants to know what style of grazing I use, right? So we've tried it all. With learning, we did the total graze, the MIG graze, the adapt, MIG being management intensive. We've done rotational. We've done the total graze. We've moved from 12 hours to 24 to 2 hours, different life cycles. But what we found is none of that is like a lot of this stuff is prescriptive. When you rotationally graze, when you management intensive graze, when you total graze, those are all prescriptions, right? That's no different than what's coming out of a university, for one. They're prescriptions on how you should do something. We've found that nature doesn't run on prescriptions. Nature runs on it's based off of weather, right? And randomness. So we adaptively graze. So we use total graze, we use rotational graze, we use management intensive grazing, and we pair that with our seasonality forage cycles. So on what we want that paddock to do. So, in the spring, we're a cool and warm season based forage, or we have a cool and warm season forage base, right? But over conventional farming or whatever, I don't necessarily like the word conventional farming, but ancestors before, right, from the feed store started planting fescue, right? Plowing up and planting fescue because that was supposed to be the best. So basically we turned Missouri into a cool season-based state. Well, our soils, our late and seed banks say we're a mix, prairie, cool and warm season. And so what we have found with these cool and warm, typically in March, into March, you have your cool season grasses start taking off. Plants like fescue orchard grass, their growth curve is going up. And you get into May, your Timothy, and then your cool season grass starts going down, their production goes down into what they call a summer slump. and then it goes back up. Right now we're in September. We're finally getting some good rains. So our cool season production is going to go back up. But it's not going to go as high as our spring grass. And from now till like some hard freezes, our cool season will continue to grow. And then we can defer grazing and stockpile, and then we have basically how we graze now will determine how much winter feed. Everything basically what we do, it determines how much winter feed we're going to be able to have. How much, because that's when we have deferred winter feed, that's where we decrease the amount of hay fed. And so what we have found is when we do like a total graze of our cool season grasses in June, we open up that canopy and allow warm season grasses to come through to fill the gap of our summer slump. And then we have green growing plants. So we basically, this is 8 years in, we've had green growing plants pretty much from the start of the growing season till now for our cows to graze.
What is total grazing?
Total grazing is like that, the idea of grazing it all to the dirt, or grazing at all the plant material above ground, followed by huge rests.
Is that different than mob grazing?
That I don't know. Maybe it's a similar. I mean,
there's just so many different terms, so I was just curious.
Yeah,
I wasn't
mob
sure.
or management intensive grazing. But with a total graze, right? You take every plant, make them eat every plant above ground.
And then whenever just managing all the paddocks and whatnot, kind of going back to the observations, how are you tracking all this? Because I know with agriculture, it's a lot of observations and then kind of adjusting as time goes on. How do you track around here?
We use pasture map, and the only thing we truly use it for is just so we can follow days of rest. Because that's really all I'm looking at is rest. Because we want, in the springtime, we might get away of 20 to 30 days of rest,
In one paddock?
Yeah, before our next graze. And then coming out of summer, like right now, we might be going on 110 days of rest.
I see.
So that's what we're looking at.
That makes sense. And then kind of going to transitioning a little bit to the marketing aspect, because you said back when you first started doing the meat business, how did you market that from the beginning? Because you were saying consumer or direct to consumer, and then how did you go about the marketing?
Yeah, so started at farmers market, right? Let's see.
Well, what are your thoughts on farmers markets as a whole?
I think they're good, but that's a certain customer, right? What I'm seeing is getting the person to go from a farmer's market to an online purchase of your meat is very difficult. So, Perennial Pastures has done a really good job. I don't know if you follow them. Mm-hmm. They've done a really good job of building this farmers market model, right? Where they have farmers market ambassadors and just, where they're hitting multiple markets, I think year round, right? And so, but
I have to ask, I'm going to go visit them later.
Are you going to see them?
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Kevin's a good friend. So, that kind of model works, right? But when you have these farms that aren't at scale and they can only hit one market one Saturday a week, right? It's not necessarily scalable, right? And it's, that takes a Saturday, right? It's like one planned day, you can't do anything because your income hinges on you being there. And so I have a friend that's farmers market. I produce beef for them and kind of been coaching them as they've starting their regenerative journey. And the one thing I told them is when you go to a farm, because I started a farmer's market last year, it's like you need a website and you need to try to get these people to buy online. Because when the market's down, you need them to still come order from you. They can pick up at the market, make that an option, but you need to figure out how to convert sales to online. Because after a couple of years, what I've seen is people that do farmers market experience burnout.
Yes.
Bad. Because they have a family and their Saturdays are sucked by a market.
It's very, I only did that for a few months, and I would think about the long term of that, and it's just, that's why I brought that up. It's a means to end, and it's very good to meet new consumers that have never met a farmer.
Yeah.
But man, is it tough.
Very good to connect with your customer, right? But yeah, and it's a good foot in the door. But so like when I started at a farmer's market, I don't think I delivered it. When I started, it was farmers markets and COVID shut it down 2 months into the farmers market. So then it moved to, kind of texting just people in St. Louis. Mm-hmm. Like, hey, this is what I've got. And then I would just put it in like plastic grocery bags and drive down to St. Louis with coolers. And so like I was this guy out on the road, everybody.
Unidentified ice cream truck.
Yeah, everybody has just a Ford Ranger and some big white Yeti coolers. And I'm just this only person on the highway because everybody in St. Louis is scared. And so like I'm just out there delivering meat.
Yeah.
And so that's how it really started. And then kind of just posting in Facebook. We're not even running, it wasn't even ads. It was just like posting in groups like, hey, you got product. And so then that's how it grew. And then, I was taking all the orders on just my cell phone, right? And I'd have to go, no inventory management. So as somebody's order came in, I'd have to go pack it. So like I would copy and paste and blast out everything I had. And then the first order comes in and then, I'd have to text back like, okay, this is gone. So that's how it started. Then moved to online sales with barn to door. And there were certain things about barn to door I despised. So then we went to Shopify.
I've not heard many great things about barn to door.
Yeah, they're really good to get you onboarded, and then they drop you like it's hot, and the turnover in the company's high, and whatever. Yeah, so 10 out of 10 don't recommend them. So we're Shopify now. But Shopify has its, issues. It's, with doing everything you do has to have an app, and then getting those apps to work properly without somebody, super skilled is difficult. But
with online direct to consumer, how do you make that a viable option from an economic standpoint?
Like
because it's
for
just
them.
Well, because one, it's just hard. It's hard to. I'm assuming it's hard to have a direct to consumer to where you ship directly because it's pretty costly to ship, right?
Yeah.
So how do you one just market that in general, especially because people are willingly buying that, and then do they pay for the shipping as well, or what is that like?
Yeah. So how we do it is I'm big on bulk and wanting my customers to buy in bulk. So like I don't offer, the options to pick and choose what you put in the cart. It's like we have bundles and we have them set. We did go down to a 15-pound bundle, but most of our bundles are 25 pounds. And to make it work, one, we're teaching our customers how to buy in bulk, right? Food security.
How are you teaching them?
Because that's all we offer. So it's either you buy it or you don't.
Yeah.
So if you like it, you got to buy it. Yeah. We talk about it some on reels and stuff, but the main reasons are for me to ship a 15-pound bundle, in a 25-pound bundle, it requires the exact same price, right? Same box, same amount of ice, pretty much the same UPS shipping rate. So, it's just, consumer education. It's like, you got to pay it for this, but if you can order more and it's, it's cheaper when you order more. And we reward price breaks. So for every 25 pounds you jump up, we drop our price. So like 25 pounds is, let's say it's $11 a pound. 50 pounds may work out to like $10.50, 75, 10, 100, $9.50. So we kind of reward the buying more.
Yeah.
And that's just because we do that because it's like we want the customer to maximize their dollar. If they got to pay $25 in shipping for 25 pounds and they got to pay 25 for 15 pounds, right? Because it's based off of really the box. The only thing different is the amount of product in each box, and it doesn't really change that much. You're talking 10 pounds on a box that's the same size. So, and it's just a couple dollars difference on UPS shipping.
Now, for most of your consumers that buy directly online, are these people that have previously bought from a rancher directly, or are you able to gauge that? Because why I ask, I'm trying to help get folks to want to buy in bulk, but for a lot of the stuff that you would be buying in bulk, they've never purchased, they've never cooked with. And so I know that's a really big barrier to entry on top of, having, say, a freezer just to stock your meat in. From like an educational standpoint, How do you go about that to try to push people to buy more? Because it, like you said, it makes more economic sense to buy in bulk. That's why I like what Kevin does, where I know he has offers to where he can also ship you a freezer along with the meat. So I didn't know how you go about that from the education standpoint.
Yeah, it's just reels. My phone number out there everywhere, so people call. We have a couple like retail stores in St. Louis that carry our product. So it's just like if you're on the fence, go do that. Or buy a 15-pound bundle. We keep our product offering to just like a few things. I mean, our staples are ground beef and ancestral blend. So we have that, and then we just keep a combo of each. We have a combo box, and then some of those, we have we have a quarter beef and then a sampler. So, and we just put like in our quarter beef or sampler, it's like the best animals go in, because not every animal is a ground beef animal, but not every animal is a steak animal, right?
Can you explain that?
So yeah, just sometimes like the age of beef can cut a little more tough, and so like the whole beef ground steaks and all make really, really, really good ground beef, but it might not cut like the best steak. So we try to put the best steaks, in our boxes, because we want repeat customers, right? So it's not like we're gonna put bad meat in it.
Yeah.
And so we keep it pretty simple, just a few boxes, and that's what ground beef, basically. That's our staple.
Then what about just all of the other cuts of beef? How do you try to sell those if you're not, say if you are selling a lot of the boxes, but it's primarily ground beef, how do you go about selling the not as popular cuts? Is that when you go towards retail, or?
No, we just grind them up.
Oh, so you just grind them up, okay.
Just have really good ground beef.
Because I'm just trying to think too, from people that are actually just trying to raise beef too, because that's one thing that people don't think about from the cost is the shipping cost of it all, the actual packaging and all that, but then all the actual gas to transport. Because you mentioned yesterday that you were making deliveries.
Yep.
I guess, would you be able to shed light on just how those costs are for you? Because that's something that people really don't understand at all. Is shipping and fuel costs can be very expensive.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of costs people don't really know. So, like for us, at the current cattle market prices, when we take something to the processor and we get it back per pound of ground beef, we're about $7.50 a pound. No, $8 a pound. Sorry. Up to $8.50 just per single pound of meat returned. That's just to buy the cow. Or basically purchase the cow, right? Because what we did to get a better handle on our numbers is we started another LLC. So Horstman Livestock it owns live animals, and Hortsmann Cattle Company is the meat business. So Hortsmann Cattle Co. purchases animals from Horstmann Livestock at a fair market rate, or a rate, determined for the animal it's being sold, right?
So you're running two separate businesses?
Yeah, because we got to have those books. Because what was happening was you couldn't really tell how, like when we were raising animals, like Hortsmann Cattle Company used to own all the cows too. And so like when you were raising the animal from a calf to the finish, to the meat business, there was no real way to account for how much that animal, you would know like what it would have been sold for, but it's hard to tell like how much inputs went into like the cow herd versus the meat business versus, just big bunch of mess.
Would Hortsmann Cattle Co. exist without the other side?
Could it?
Yeah.
Could our meat business exist without Hortsmann Livestock? Yeah, we would source from other regenerative farms. We do some of that. Hortsmann Livestock sources from other regenerative farms right now. Then we graze them.
I see.
So, but basically what we've determined is for pricing, it's about $8.50 per pound of beef returned, and then processing is $2. So we're like $6.50, $7 of is what it costs for just the meat, plus $2 for processing. And so we got to have, if it's let's say it's $6.50 for the meat, $2 for the processing, that's $8.50 we got to have for a pound of beef just to break even. No, so that's why our prices are. By the time we run ads, I have 2 people that help ads and emails and Shopify and tax and, all these other things. I mean, it adds up. Like our margins on the meat business with how high the cattle prices are not good.
And this is what I'm trying to get at is perception is not always reality, to where, you might see a farm that is extremely doing well because they're running so many cattle, but the profit's not necessarily high.
Yeah, like right now, with how high the cattle prices has been, it's been really good for Hortsmann Livestock, right? Our live animal business. But our meat business side, we're more focused on just maintaining the customers we've had. If we pick up organic new customers, that's great. But we're more focused on maintaining our customer base and until the cattle market comes down. Because right now, we're breaking even at best on the meat business side.
At best.
At best. Because cattle prices, because we've hit
Can you explain why, like where it stands, why you say at best?
Because we've hit the price of what we can ask per pound of ground beef and sell it like to a consumer.
That will actually pay it, yeah.
Yeah, we've hit that. I think we've hit the max there versus, and what the cattle market is saying it's for.
Okay. Dang.
So, yeah, don't start a meat business.
Well, see, that's...
But like when the cattle market comes down, you know, like, right, there'll be some time where, you know, we might make $1 a pound again, right? The margins on ground beef is, like, everybody thinks you're just making a killing.
Yeah, and that's what I'm trying to show to the consumers. They think that
Yeah.
because whenever prices increase, they think that equates, that means the rancher's raking in the dough.
Yeah. I mean, it is probably for the case of the big box stores, right? But like the farm, the family farm.
Yeah, but the ranchers that they think are making the money, like you and all the other ones that I'm meeting, that's what they think.
Yeah. Yeah, because we charge more. No, it's because we're not doing it at scale, and the main thing at scale is processing, right?
Would you say processing is the biggest bottleneck for anyone raising animals?
Price-wise, yes. But there's tons of processors out there, right? It's not a lack of processors. It's just that the processors, you know, it's so expensive.
But do you think that's because of the lack of processors, though?
To an extent, but they're also...
Because even like New Hampshire, for example, they're kind of talking about you're on a 2-year wait list in New Hampshire.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that could have something to do. Like around here, we could call and get in the next couple weeks somewhere if we needed to. I mean, they just built another big cow plant you can go to. So it's like labor, right? It all comes down to labor and what you're paying your workforce and the quality of your workforce. Like our one processor has pretty good labor, right? It's just good people. Not saying all processors and, undervalued, whatever. But
do you think that's a uniquely Missouri thing? Because agriculture here is...
Yeah, I mean, we're a big cow state.
I was going to say, it seems like Missouri, the culture of agriculture is way more connected and still together versus a lot of other states.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that could be some of it. I mean, within a 45-minute drive of where we're sitting right now, I could be to 3 USDA processing plants and a handful of state plants. Within a 45-minute drive.
Yeah, see, that's a way different.
Yeah, but it's still high.
Yeah, yeah.
Right, and I don't know. And we look at that like we could put 40 cows. We do about 70 to 80 beeves a year. We could put 2 semi-loads together and ship them to a plant that could do 40 at a time, where we could bring them all back at 40. Right, and probably cut our processing bill in half. But that defeats kind of our mission of local, right? Using a local, like the owner of the processor lives 10 minutes from here, right? Like he'll be at my wedding in a week type stuff, right?
Yeah.
And so there's something to that too. So it just, that goes back to the ranch's mission, but there's a lot of people that, bigger businesses that, ship their cattle to bigger processors, but you got to have scale to do that. That's where it all comes back to scale.
And that's why it seems like most farms and ranches cannot scale. That's why, do you believe regenerative agriculture is scalable?
I do, but you have to figure out, I mean, we're doing it, right? And
well, you said right now you're barely breaking even
on our meat business.
Yeah,
but that's different than our livestock business.
But I'm also just talking on the context of like a meat business for someone raising that. That's because for
a meat business is its own enterprise. It's not like pigs. It's not right. Everybody, you got to look at it as its other enterprise.
I see.
Right, that's where everybody thinks it's just like you have cows, you have a meat business, right? You have cows, there's tons of options you can do. Your meat business is its own enterprise. Like our cow business is making really good money. Our meat business isn't because of how the price of cattle. But
so that's just going in tandem with the market right now, and you're saying that
like if the cattle drop,
because the market's obviously cyclical. And so,
yeah, if the cattle market drops, our cow business won't make, our cow, won't make as much as our meat business per se, right? But like when the cow market, in our meat business, we would offer free shipping and we would do tons of perks and promos and things like that, I'd try to be extremely generous. Like just this year, we just can't be as generous with percents off and free delivery and stuff like that.
But from a business standpoint, you usually don't want to have that as your continuing selling point, because then that's the only way customers are coming back.
Yeah, with promos and yeah.
So for you then currently, how are you able to keep the customers that you do have?
I think they like our product and they like what we're doing.
Do they also say if you were to have to increase prices, and they'll be completely supportive?
I think some will. We'll lose some. I mean, our businesses have changed so much over the last couple of years, right? That it's really hard to say. Because we went from beef, pork, chicken, eggs, to just beef, right? That beef was then home delivered. Then I switched, and then it was in boxes, right? Now it's shipping. Now it's nationwide. So each year something big has happened. Now I don't hardly do any deliveries. We deliver bulk beef, halves, wholes, and then everything else is shipped. So like we went from buying a single pound of ground beef to now only being able to buy 25 pounds of ground that gets shipped to your door. Like I remember first starting out, I drove a pack of brats and a pound of ground beef 60 miles. That's all. My only deliveries for a Tuesday, and I drove it. So, yeah. So.
Well, that's why I want to continue to talk on this just in general. It's just the fact that
regenerative agriculture is scalable. But it's going to take enterprises, whether it's a meat business enterprise or you might have to have multiple enterprises working together. I don't know if just if you pasture pig, 100 acres of regenerative agriculture, if you're doing it really good, it probably could work. But it takes so much more land.
Yeah, well, I always just think about, I'm constantly thinking about this because we're a net importer of beef. Brazil is now overtaking the U.S. this year as the #1 beef producer in the world. When I went to the RCAF USA conference, they talked about, I think it was 52% of cattle ranchers we've lost since 1980. We've lost 91% of hog farms, 89% of dairy. The chicken industry is obviously with Tyson and all of those.
I do think it's not going to get better for beef people. I do think that all the other enterprises have vertically integrated. I think it's going to start coming down to beef. People say it's not, and they say it's not going to happen just because of everybody that's around that has 20 cows that does it as a hobby. It's like people don't do egg layers. Egg layers as a hobby is way different than beef cows as a hobby. So that's kind of one of the arguments against it being vertically integrated. But I think for the most part, it'll become vertically integrated. We already have the end product basically is vertically integrated, right? It's owned by basically 4 companies, the ending portion. So, and they're all pretty much up in there. So, can you run cows on your own place and scale it? Yes, but you're going to have the land.
Because I'm also just thinking too long term, because thinking on generations ahead, not because I'm assuming, do you want to eventually pass down this to somebody?
Yeah.
Because that's what I think too, is not only can you make this successful, but you're not passing this over to, say, your children, and it's just a messy situation that only gets more messy. And that's what I'm constantly thinking about with agriculture, is how can this be a viable, profitable option to where you don't have to sell your soul to an off the farm job just to even try to make this get by, and then you finally slowly are barely profitable, and then you pass that down to your kids, and then who knows? I don't. I'm constantly thinking about that, and it.
Yeah, that's like the biggest mission, right? Or like one of our biggest goals, right? Is how do we make something that is scalable, that isn't affected by seed, feed, or chemical, synthetic fertilizers or chemical. How do we make something that isn't affected by those prices, right?
Yeah.
And those prices may determine the cattle prices, but those aren't going to determine, what we spend and don't spend, right? Equipment, like we don't want, so my focus is how do we make a farm or ranch that can run on its own without chemical fertilizer, and it just all comes back to soil health, right? And that's where adaptive grazing comes into play. That's what is going to determine the success and the viability of the farm. It's not going to be who has the biggest weaning calf. It's going to be who is the most flexible, who's able to buy undervalued cattle, who's going to be able to graze them on land with very little inputs. It's going to be not how much you can make, but it's how much can you save.
Now, from your experiences, with schooling, the different various jobs, while also trying to build this, what advice would you have for folks that, might want to do ranching? Should they work on a ranch first, full time? Should they kind of do similar to what you're doing, is slowly building up something small with whatever property they have, while also working for somebody else learning ranching? Or I guess, do you have any advice for those folks?
Yeah, you need to surround yourself with people that you want to be like, while probably working for somebody else, but also doing it on your own. That is one thing. You somehow have to take ownership of something. So like when cows get out, they better be yours, so you can figure out how to put them back in. You'll be more apt to make sure your cows don't get out versus somebody else's. Or like if sheep get out or guard dogs, you're gonna have to figure out they need to be yours, because you'll work that much harder and you'll figure it all out, right? If you just work for somebody else, you're not really figuring it. You're gonna figure it out, but you can also say, this is kinda, you got like no skin in the game. So, yeah, that's one thing we're gonna do so we buy and sell stocker cattle. So we buy them, graze them, sell them, buy, graze, sell. And
how long is that cycle?
It just depends how much weight we want to put on, but about 100, 120 days. And that's scalable, right? Because it's cash flow, right? And we can do multiple rounds, and you need cash flow, right? That's what was nice about the meat business. That's why we started. It was cash flow. We were getting paid weekly. When you just have spring calving cows, your cash flow is basically limited to once a year, and then you have to be really good at managing money.
Did you ever think about doing any type of herd share, or do you do herd shares?
No, I don't. Which is what you sell. What's a herd share?
Well, I just know people will pretty much. I mean, it's kind of similar to CSA. You buy for percentage of the animal or the whole animal, and that's pretty much that. You're just essentially, you got skin in the game a little bit through that from the consumer.
Yeah, I mean, to an extent, it sounds like the place that you're buying from needs money, right?
That too. I mean, it's kind of the mutual benefit of that, to where they get the money up front, and you're essentially part owner of that whichever one you paid for. But then also you eventually get that back as meat.
Yeah, I mean, they should just buy your product and be cut and dry. I don't know. The herd share seems to me, it seems too risky as a consumer, right? Because why would I am not going to want to put my money with some other farmer that may or may not know what he's doing, right?
But how can a consumer even know from the beginning if that farmer that they're buying at the end is
Ask another farmer. Because there's a lot of people selling herd shares that probably have no business selling herd shares.
And that's why I also asked because it's very tough from a consumer standpoint. I noticed this a lot on social media to where they follow a lot of influencers or other people because they're sharing tidbits on agriculture that to the consumer, these people are the experts, but the influencers only know 1% more than the consumers. And so that's why it's so hard right now for a consumer to understand anything because they base a lot of their knowledge off of what they see online.
Yeah.
And whoever's sharing it might seem like the expert. So that's why I wanted to bring up the question of...
Most of the like we try to share, but it's freaking hard because I just want to raise cattle. Right.
And that's what most farmers want to do. They just want to farm. They don't want to
market.
So
the guys that are doing it that have only been doing it for a couple of years, farming for a few years, their first generation, I mean, they might have a good idea, but I would find it very hard to put money with somebody that's only been doing it for a couple of years because they haven't even experienced a full cow cycle, right? 7 years, right? They haven't. I mean, I've been farming for myself for 13 years, and before that, I mean, I've been basically doing it since I was 3, right? So, and I'm 31, so that's a few years. So that's you gotta wade through all the BS that's these influential farmers.
I'm not even talking influencer farmers, I'm just talking about influencers. There's people in the middle who speak on behalf, and I didn't realize how much I'm going to be fighting against that BS. Yeah. It's been very infuriating, to say the least, because, that's a whole nother tangent that's not...
Yeah, basically you need to go see your farmer.
That's why I always tell people to shake the hand that feeds you. That's the only way to truly verify where your food comes from. It's the only way to truly understand what goes into producing food, and it's the only way to truly understand the farmer themselves. And how?
Yeah, most people, like when they come, they don't know all the other stuff we actually do, right? We don't know about like the stocker cattle, that we use because we need other income besides meat business, right? And differentiating stockers to meat business cattle to, it's just like, we do a lot of other things because the meat business isn't what's paying like the bills. That's more of something like I'm passionate about, right? I love producing ground beef. Like that's my favorite. I love selling ground beef to my customers because I think it tastes good, and I think it's a good representation of what's coming off our land, and I think it's healthy. I want people to eat beef. I'm not gonna go. I used to be on the going around telling conventional farmers or saying, it's bad. It's just like they don't see the big picture of like what we're trying to do. Like I see, how everything is affected. Like, let's see, how would I explain that? Right? Fertilizer spiked a few years ago with like the Ukraine stuff, and those type things. Corn prices fluctuate. Why would you want to base a business off of, a already tough business of basically foreign countries, fertilizer prices, right? It's just stupid. It's hard, especially when you can switch your grazing and do it. It's like we want to spend money on inputs, but you have land that is very capable of producing what you need it to do, right? You can produce beef off your land. Why would you want to spend inputs to feed your land to produce that?
Yeah.
I guess is what I'm trying to say. There's going to be some learning curves and hard times the first probably 5-6 years as you learn, but
That's just like any business, though.
yeah. But it's like your land is you know you want to make it as self-sustainable as possible. You know, like I don't like the word sustainable because that implies that you're sustaining, and I don't. You know, why in the hell would you want to stay the same?
Yep, no, I'm on the same page with you on
So
that.
we want to regenerate, but you want your land to sustain your business in agriculture. You don't want to rely on other inputs because it's just going to get harder and harder for the next generation. So like we're taking hopefully, if I'm thinking this correctly and how it's going to play out, we're taking the hard years. I'm taking the hard years now so the next generation doesn't have to, right?
How are you planning that long term while also doing, being present and doing the actual work to where long term, these are the hard years for you, but not for the next generation?
I think the hardest part is just getting the land and all of its nutrient cyclings and your soil microbes and your ecology. It's just getting all that back, right?
Are you doing soil testing and all that? Or
No.
are just doing regen ag and just through observations
observation.
Yeah.
Yeah, because once the soil, they're going to send it to a lab and put whatever they do to it. Yeah, no.
I was talking on this in the previous podcast a couple days ago on just like observation science, because that's something that's science term in today's society is very polarizing, which is hilarious. Alan Savory talks about it a lot, but then just the whole observation science doesn't give enough credit, especially for agriculture. Farmers, just all food in Maha, it seems to still talk about our food without the farmers. And it's interesting. This is another reason why I tell people to go shake the hand that feeds you, because if you go out and visit some fields that just looks like a field to you and you just ask him questions of the farmer, he will talk your ear off about this piece of land that he observes every single day. Mm-hmm. And so I'd just love to hear your perspective of what are you doing every day whenever you're obviously rotating your cattle and whatnot, but whenever you're actually observing, what are you looking at in the fields?
Oh, we look at a bunch of different things: insects, bugs, birds, life, diversity of plants. That's kind of like the main, just high level stuff we're doing. I want to build on that comment you made about science, right? The only science people trust anymore now is stuff that comes out of a lab, right?
Yes.
It's like nothing, and I've never really even thought of that, of like what I'm doing is science, but I guess it is. We make a hypothesis and we're trying to run tests to see a conclusion. And, what we did was we think regenerative agriculture is going to work if we could pull inputs and then implement grazing. Will we make our land better? And yeah. So we're doing that. We're seeing it. We're seeing it anymore. It's just different native plants coming. That's kind of been our big indicator, is like all the Indian grass and grease grass and sensitive briar and all these native plants coming in. That's been our huge indicator.
So those were dormant whenever you first started this?
Yeah, those weren't there. That was all one, basically, monocrop fescue, and then it was followed by landsleaf ragweed.
And then, did you plant a lot of those seeds too, or
no?
These were just stored below, and then as you're
seed bank.
Sorry, say that again.
The latent seed bank.
Can you explain that?
It's basically like, I don't really know too much about it, but supposedly it's just like the native seed bank that was there. And as you switch your grazing, stuff starts appearing, right? It starts with a heavy forb presence, so like all your weeds. So like as you switch grazing, but then your grasses, it's kind of like successional. And so that's what where we're at. We're kind of in this grasses. Like these are like the holy grail is when you get your grasses to come back.
That's probably a cool feeling to see.
Yeah, it's really cool.
So I guess one of my final questions, I always like asking this one, just through your journey, I mean, especially since it essentially takes you back to when you're 3, what's just been one of your favorite memories?
My favorite memories?
Or just experience or favorite aspect of agriculture?
Oh, I don't know. I just love cows. I don't know. I love grazing cows. I mean, some of my best memories is favorite memories is when this is my grandpa's farm and we saved this for this last part of our winter rotation. We calve close here. We calve out here on all this stockpiled grass, which is my grandpa's farm. So every spring, we mix up which paddocks we go to, of course, but we always kind of end up back here for calving because I love calving cows on his farm and new grass.
What is it about cows that you love?
I don't know. I have no idea.
That's so.
But it's an addiction.
It seems like that's the case for, again, going back to a lot of farmers just want to farm.
Yeah. And there's a lot of people that think they want to farm, and it's kind of differentiating, if you're going to put your herd shares there. A lot of people kind of get caught up in the romanticism of the farming, but they're actually truly not farmers. And you can, as a farmer that loves farming, I can tell the difference of people that think that that's where they're going to cut a fat calf and make a lot of money, and versus the actual animal husbandry love it because they love it.
I agree. And you won't know until you shake the hand that feeds you. So
Yep.
Thank you again.
Yeah, thank you.
Sweet.
Visit www.theregenaissance.co to learn more.